Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Wednesday, May 17, 2023. President Joe Biden expresses confidence that a deal to raise the nation's debt ceiling can be reached before a default expected in just a few weeks, as negotiators from the White House and the office of House Speaker Kevin McCarthy meet to discuss federal spending levels. House Republicans want to link the two issues. President saying today the talks over the two issues are not related. President also saying he's open to a House Republican request to put in place work requirements for some federal assistance programs. We'll have the latest in just a moment. Access to the abortion pill mifepristone going before a federal appeals court. We'll hear some of the oral argument and talk about the case with a legal affairs reporter with The Hill. U.S. House taking a vote related to a resolution to expel Republican Congressman George Santos. The congressman has admitted lying about parts of his resume and does face over a dozen federal charges, including fraud. House passing a bill to make assaulting a police officer a deportable offense for non-U.S. citizens. President Biden awarding medals of valor to 9 police officers and firefighters for their bravery, 2 of the officers dying in the line of duty. And former House Speaker Paul Ryan, Republican from Wisconsin, has his official speaker portrait unveiled in the U.S. Capitol building. This from USA Today. President Joe Biden pushed back at new work requirements for welfare programs that Republicans covet in a package to raise the debt ceiling, insisting that any changes he supports would be insignificant, yet not taking the issue off the table entirely. Expanded work requirements for recipients of SNAP, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, and TANF, Temporary Assistance for Needy Families, and Medicaid have emerged as a key sticking point in debt ceiling talks between the White House and House Speaker Kevin McCarthy. President Biden's careful posturing follows a backlash from congressional Democrats who raised alarm about the possibility of caving to Republicans' push to expand work requirements for welfare programs that serve low-income Americans. That reporting from USA Today. President Biden spoke in the White House Roosevelt Room before he left for Japan for a meeting of the Group of Seven, or G7, Leaders Summit.
We had a productive meeting yesterday, and with all 4 leaders in the Congress. It was civil and respectful, and everyone came to the meeting, I think, in good faith. I'm confident that we'll get the agreement on the budget, that America will not default. And every leader in the room understands the consequences if we fail to pay our bills. And it would be catastrophic for the American economy and the American people if we didn't pay our bills. And I'm confident everyone in the room agreed with the speaker, from the speaker to the majority leader, to the majority leader in the House and the Senate, the majority leader in the Senate, the minority leader in the Senate, as well as the leader, the Democratic leader in the House. We're going to come together because there's no alternative to do the right thing for the country. We have to move on. And to be clear, this negotiation is about the outlines of what the budget will look like, not about whether or not we're going to, in fact, pay our debts. The leaders have all agreed we will not default. Every leader has said that. And I'm proud of the progress my administration has made. We've reduced the deficit in the first 2 years by $1.7 trillion in the first 2 years. And I proposed a budget that would reduce another $3 trillion over the next decade. That includes more revenue by asking the wealthy and large corporations to begin to pay their fair share, and cutting subsidies that exist in the law now to big oil and big pharma. Yesterday, we all agreed that both the Speaker McCarthy and I would designate senior members that we would negotiate to give our authority to make agreements in detail what we wanted. So we narrowed the group. To meet and hammer out our differences. And we've done that. In fact, they met last night. They're going to be meeting again today. and I'll be in constant contact with my team while I'm at the G7, and be in close touch with Speaker McCarthy and other leaders as well. Now, what I have done, in anticipation that we won't get it all done till I get back, is I've cut my trip short in order to be for the final negotiations and sign the deal with the majority leader. I made clear that, and I'll say it again, America is not a deadbeat nation. We pay our bills. The nation has never defaulted on this debt, and it never will. We're going to continue these discussions with the congressional leaders in the coming days until we reach an agreement, and I'll have more to say about that on Sunday. then I want to have a press conference on this issue. As it stands now, the intention is to go to the G7, be back here on Sunday, hold a press conference, and in the meantime, I've spoken to the Australian leader Albanese, and I'm going to be seeing him at the G7. He'll be there as well, along with the Indian Prime Minister and along with the Japanese as well. So the Quad members will be there. We'll get a chance to talk separately at the meeting, but it's unlikely I'm going to be going on to Australia. So thank you very much.
Mr. President, what about work requirements specifically are you still considering? It sounds like it's still on the table and you haven't ruled it out. Which would you be willing to accept?
Well, I'm not going to accept any work requirements that's going to impact on medical health needs of people. I'm not going to accept any work requirements that go much beyond what is already. I voted years ago for the work requirements that exist. But it's possible there could be a few others, but not anything of any consequence.
What message does this send to PNG and to Australia? I know that it was important to you to focus on Asia in this trip, but this is having to be put aside. Is this almost a win for China?
No, because we're still meeting. We still have 4 good allies.
Will you be announcing new sanctions on Russia during the G7?
With President Xi soon, sir?
Whether it's soon or not, we will be meeting.
You will be meeting or you will be speaking?
President Biden at the White House this morning saying at the end there, away from the microphone, about whether he would be speaking with the Chinese President Xi Jinping, whether it's soon or not, we will be meeting. Reports are that negotiators for the president and House Speaker Kevin McCarthy over the debt ceiling met Tuesday night late and will continue their meeting. The potential default estimated by the Treasury Department as early as June 1st. On the president's side, Louisa Terrell, director of the Office of Legislative Affairs, Shalanda Young, director of the Office of Management and Budget, and Steve Ricchetti, a close advisor to the president. And for Speaker McCarthy, Congressman Garrett Graves, Republican from Louisiana. On Capitol Hill today, Speaker McCarthy holding a news conference with other House Republicans and joined by Senate Republicans talking about the debt ceiling.
Yesterday was a change. Yesterday, united with the Republicans in the House and the Republicans in the Senate who stood up and said they would no longer go along with the idea that you would just raise the debt limit, borrow money for China to provide to people not to work. United together, we are standing with the American people. This is exactly what every household does in America, every business, and every state capital has to do. A debt ceiling is the equivalent of your child having a credit card. And for the last 21 years, this child has spent all the money up to the limit, and all you have done is raise the debt ceiling. Well, now it's become a real problem, because you owe more on the card than you make all year and another 20%. So is it wrong? Is it not reasonable? Before you lift it, you're responsible for paying what was spent. But should you first look at how you're spending your money? That's exactly what we're doing with Limit, Save, Grow. Now the President and Leader Schumer have finally backed off their idea that they won't negotiate. They finally backed off the insane, unrational, unsensible idea that you just raise the debt ceiling. The President has selected 2 individuals, OMB and Ricchetti, to sit down with us, but our timeline is short. This is what I wanted to avoid 105 days ago. And when the Republicans in the House lifted the debt ceiling, Secretary Yellen had never told us the deadline was June 1st. We wanted to act ahead of time. And we do that issue after issue. Just like the President avoided the border with Title 42, the House Republicans did not. We actually passed a bill to secure our border. We continue to listen to the American public. And I will tell you, as Speaker, we have a group of Republicans in the Senate that have listened to the American people as well.
House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, Republican from California, on Capitol Hill, surrounded by House and Senate Republicans supporting his position on the debt ceiling. After some of those others spoke, the Speaker came back to take questions from reporters, including on President Biden's comments today about whether he would accept work requirements for recipients of federal assistance programs, and also about the president's advocacy for raising taxes on the wealthy.
President Biden just said he's confident a deal will get made, but he also said on work requirements he'd accept not anything of any consequence. Where does that
I don't understand anything that has consequence. This is a senator who voted for work requirements. Listen, I think when you're sitting in the room and you're listening to the American public, why wouldn't he want to help people get out of poverty? But listen to really what he's saying. So the decision he's making in his mind is, if he doesn't want to have something that has consequences, he wants to borrow more money from China to pay an able-bodied person who has no dependents, not even to look for a job, not even go to school for 20 hours. So you're going to ask little Sam to make that $94,000 higher because we're going to borrow from China for a person who could go get a job to not help him get one. So what you're going to have is a supply chain that doesn't work as well, more dependency on China, and making America in a weaker position. I think that's wrong. So I wish he was here, then we could debate it even more. Yes, sir. Oh, you already asked one.
Are you open to considering a tax increase on the wealthy in exchange?
Did you listen? Were you here earlier? No, I'm not being a jerk. But have you read the CBO numbers or anything? Okay, so on a 50-year average, we normally bring in 17% of GDP. We're bringing in 20%. You know how many times in history we've done that? Twice. 1944 and 2000. So if we're bringing in normally 17, we're bringing in 20, that means we're bringing in more money than any time in American history. But what we're spending, for the last 21 years, we spent more money than we brought in. But instead of only spending 21% of GDP like we normally did for the last 50 years, when the Democrats came in, they spent $6 trillion. Now, I don't know if you're an economic major or whatever, but if you study Morton Friedman, he would tell you the only place that inflation is created is government. So that $6 trillion brought us inflation. So what did that do? Your money goes less. You have less money to spend. It doesn't go as far. We've had, of our 4 biggest bank failures in America, we had 3 of them in the last couple of months. Why? Because interest rates went up. Because the only way you curve inflation is you make interest rates higher than the inflation rate. So what does that do? That harms people from buying houses. That means you're paying more on your credit card. But that means every taxpayer is paying more because our debt. So we're going to pay more on interest. But he went all the way up to 23%. So we're spending more than we spent in 50 years, but we're bringing in more than we've been in 50 years. So I go back to your question. Having that knowledge now, would you raise that question again?
Yeah, but would that be a way to
No.
some of the provisions you
No, it's very clear. You know what I told the president 105 days ago when I sat in the Oval Office? I have no preconceived notion of what we have to do in the debt ceiling except 2 things. We're not going to raise taxes, and we're not going to pass a clean debt ceiling. But we have to spend less than we spent the last year. So let's sit down and talk about that. But he decided, no, I shouldn't negotiate with somebody. I'm just going to do what I want to do, my way or the highway. That's not the way our government is designed to work. It's not the way business works. It's not the way your household works. And it's not going to work here either.
House Speaker Kevin McCarthy today on Capitol Hill at a news conference with other House Republicans and Senate Republicans. The House Democratic leader, Hakeem Jeffries, is urging every member of his caucus to sign a discharge petition introduced today by Congressman Brendan Boyle, Democrat of Pennsylvania, that would bring a clean debt ceiling increase directly to the House floor for a vote, bypassing the House Republican majority's control of the schedule. Congressman Jeffries writing to his colleagues, emerging from the White House meeting, I'm hopeful that a real pathway exists to find an acceptable bipartisan resolution that prevents a default. However, given the impending June 1st deadline and urgency of the moment, it's important that all legislative options be pursued in the event that no agreement is reached. A discharge petition in the House needs 218 signatures, a majority of the body, to be successful, and that means at least 5 House Republicans would need to sign if all 213 Democrats do. Wall Street today, the Dow up 408, NASDAQ up 157, S&P up 48. From military.com, the Department of Veterans Affairs would get an $18 billion budget bump next year under a plan released by House Republicans on Tuesday amid a knockdown, drag-out political fight over raising the U.S. debt ceiling. The GOP bill would give the VA about $153 billion in discretionary funding in 2024, up from $135 billion that the department got this year and slightly above the $143 billion the Biden administration requested for next year. The bill gives Republicans concrete numbers to point to as they rebut Biden administration accusations that their plans to slash overall government spending in 2024 would mean cuts to the VA and veteran services. That from military.com. This came up today at the Senate Veterans Affairs Committee hearing with testimony from VA Secretary Dennis McDonough. The questions from the committee chair, John Tester, Democrat from Montana.
So there has been debate over the last couple weeks about the bill that the House passed that cut programs. And the debate, most of the debates actually revolved around veteran benefits. In fact, Senator Moran addressed it in his opening statement. And by the way, Senator Moran's an honest broker, and I believe what he says when he says we want to make sure that veterans' benefits and health care and programs are funded. But as I looked at that bill, they attempted to rescind $1.8 billion for VA medical services, IT modernization, and facilities. $1.8 billion. And the question for me becomes, if we didn't cut any veteran benefits, this isn't called benefits because it has to do with administration. I guess that's the way they look at it, although VA medical services is VA medical services. You've had a chance to look at that bill. You've had a chance to look at the proposal put out by your agency. Tell me, just give me a blush of what you see that comes out of that and what kind of impacts that would have if that came to fruition. A bill that, by the way, the Speaker said did not cut benefits, in fact, called the President a liar, when in fact the President was the one who was telling the truth.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's obviously the bill itself is vague for the reasons that you talked about, and so it's difficult to ascertain. But we've looked at this a lot of different ways. We've been talking with members on all sides of this debate since January, when this debate really got engaged. And so if you just apply the 22% budget cut to VA, which again may not be what ends up happening at the end of the day, maybe it's less than that. But if you just take the top lines of the bill and you recognize that VA is not held harmless the way, for example, DOD is held harmless in the bill, then we're going to be confronted with very significant challenges. I would just give two examples. We think that if that 22% cut is applied to VA healthcare, that would mean 30 million fewer outpatient visits of the type that I just talked through that we had last year. And those are outpatient visits in the direct care system or in the community care system. Alternatively, if you look at it from the benefits administration, again, I talked about the fact that claims filed are 30% above where they were a year ago. We are fulfilling 15% more claims year on year than we did a year ago. And we're able to do that because some efficiency we've found, but also because of hiring we've carried out. If you apply the 22% reduction at VBA, that would mean 6,000 fewer staff there. We have 28,000 staff there for the first time. So we've talked, many of the members of this committee, through how our staffing model works, where we are in that staffing model. But if there's 6,000 fewer personnel to process claims, that'll be an extension of a timeline that's already too long for vets to get their benefits.
Veterans Affairs Department Secretary Dennis McDonough testifying before the Senate Veterans Affairs Committee. The questions coming from Senator John Tester, Democrat of Montana, the committee chair. The U.S. Postmaster General Louis DeJoy telling a House Oversight Subcommittee today that he plans to take more aggressive actions now that it's clear that the goal of having the Postal Service financially break even in 2023 will not occur, although the projected Postal Service losses over 10 years has been reduced from $160 billion to $70 billion. Congressman James Comer, Republican from Kentucky, asking the Postmaster General about this.
The Postal Reform Act that we passed provided you with an infusion of cash, and we changed some of the liability that was strapped on the post office. This was, in my opinion, the last-ditch effort to try to put the Postal Service in a position to where it can do what it's supposed to do, and that's be self-sustaining. Now, with mail volume continuing to decline, how do you see this moving forward in the future to where we can get to a position of self-sustainability within the Postal Service? Because I've been on record many times, I support the post office. My colleagues on the Republican side, we all have, concerns with certain aspects of the Postal Service. But as a Democrat member mentioned, it's very important in rural America. And no private company wants to deliver mail 6 days a week in rural America. So what's the future with respect to the fact that we're going to continue to see declining mail volume? How can we get the Postal Service to where it's in a position of sustainability to where Congress will not have to infuse any more cash in the future?
How much time are you going to give me?
However much time the chairman will allow.
So just for, and I certainly appreciate your help. I just want to be clear. From my standpoint of coming in and changing the organization and what cash became available and what was being infused into the organization, the PSRA did not give us an infusion of cash, right? We hadn't paid that liability in over 10 years, right? It just kind of straightened out the old legislation, and in fact, it pushed what we were obligated to pay to 6 or 7 years from now, right? We'll eventually go to a pay-as-you-go system. So that's what I'm racing. If we get back to a pay-as-you-go system, we're going to have a big problem if we don't make these changes that we're making, that we're trying to make right now. As you know, and this was a contentious issue on the bill, an integrated mail and package network, right? There's two things. There's two inefficiencies within the Postal Service. The inefficiency of how we run the place, which was all over the place. We got to fix that, right, and get at it. And there's a lot of money there. There's a lot of better working conditions for everybody that works there. I mean, who would have put together a process that handles 25 million packages a day by hand? Right? So these are the things that we're fixing. We'll root out those issues. There's a lot of money there, as I described, but the mission is still inefficient, right? That's the other inefficiency, the mission. We can deliver to 163 million addresses, whether you have one piece of mail or 10 packages and so forth. That we have to do, and we commit to do it, but we have to do that efficiently by moving packages and mail together, aggregated network as was in the bill. We will leverage our costs, leverage our conveyor system to every address. That will produce better margins in overall performance, and I believe we can become the preferred delivery provider in the nation and garner a good part of the package business, be the greenest thing, from an environmental standpoint. And I don't believe the American people want 50 trucks running up and down their neighborhood streets, even in rural America. That, if we grow our package business, which we are, I think that is I need to get $2 to $3 billion of package revenue, get these costs out that I identified. I need to do it quick. And I think we're close. We're close to solving these things.
U.S. Postmaster General Louis DeJoy, questioned by Congressman James Comer, Republican from Kentucky. He chairs the Full Oversight and Accountability Committee at today's subcommittee hearing on the Postal Service. From a Reuters article, there's this: inflationary pressures have added $3 billion in USPS costs over the last 2 years. And Louis DeJoy says that USPS projects that mail volume will fall by another 36% by 2030 after falling 42% between 2007 and 2020. This is Washington Today. A federal appeals court oral argument today in a case over whether a widely used abortion pill should still be on the market. A three-judge panel of the 5th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals in New Orleans heard an appeal of a Texas judge's ruling that overturned the FDA's approval of mifepristone over 2 decades ago. Here's some of that oral argument. One of the lawyers, Sarah Harrington, U.S. Deputy Assistant Attorney General, with questions from 2 of the judges, Jennifer Walker Elrod and James Ho.
In our view, the most straightforward way to resolve this appeal is on threshold grounds, because the plaintiffs have not even come close to establishing standing on any of their many theories of standing, and because their central claims are time-barred. I'm going to start, if I can, with their theories of individual and associational standing. Plaintiffs and their members are not regulated parties. FDA's approval of mifepristone does not require them to do anything at all. They claim injury from speculative downstream effects of choices made by a chain of other people who are not parties to this lawsuit. They allege that they have treated occasional patients who present to the emergency room with complications from taking mifepristone. But even they do not argue that simply treating a patient injures a doctor. Instead, they offer 4 theories of injury, none of which is a cognizable Article III injury that is traceable to any action of the FDA. First, they assert that they and their members will be forced to complete abortions in violation of their religious beliefs. That assertion fails for multiple reasons. First, none of them, not even one of their declarants, alleges that he or she has been compelled in the past to perform any procedure in violation of his or her religious beliefs. Their carefully worded declarations refer to experiences of other people who are not plaintiffs. They describe having provided care without saying that they objected to it or considered it to be an abortion. And they make unsupported allegations that they will in the future be required to do things that they've never in the past been required to do.
It seems that some of the declarations allude to possible surgeries and that sort of thing.
Well, none of their declarant says that he or she has in fact been forced to participate in any procedure that they would consider to be an abortion.
It says surgeries in post-abortion care.
I'm not sure any of them says that they have actually done it. They refer to other people having done it. Dr. Scott says that she has cared for patients who have needed procedures after taking mifepristone. She doesn't say that she actually provided those procedures. She doesn't say that she objected to them even if she did provide them, which again she doesn't say. She doesn't say that she objected to them on religious grounds. And none of them...
With her colleague or one of the other doctor's colleagues who performed a D&C, would that count?
No, because that person is not a plaintiff to this case, right? You need to have an identified plaintiff in the case who can say that they are imminently going to be injured, and none of them has said that they've been injured in this.
The affiants said that they were either plaintiffs or members of a plaintiff organization.
But plaintiff organizations need to identify specific members. The Supreme Court has held this in Summers and Clapper and other cases.
But wouldn't the affidavits be that specification, or are you saying there has to be something more than that?
Yes, but none of the affidavits even alleges that they themselves have had to participate in an abortion against their religious beliefs. They're very carefully worded, but none of them actually says that, and you can't read that critical fact into the declarations, excuse me.
Sarah Harrington is U.S. Deputy Assistant Attorney General, being questioned by 2 judges, Jennifer Walker Elrod and James Ho, of the 3-judge panel. It was the 5th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals in New Orleans in this abortion pill case. Another lawyer today, Erin Hawley, Senior Counsel with Alliance Defending Freedom, here questioned by Judge Elrod.
The FDA has talked a lot this morning about deference, but courts do not defer to agencies when they ignore congressional commands, nor when they put politics above women's health. And that's precisely what happened here. Confronted with a drug that could not otherwise be approved, FDA marketed mifepristone by labeling pregnancy and illness. Then FDA stripped this drug of virtually every safeguard it had once deemed necessary in order to sell the drug, despite 0 studies showing that this complete deregulation was safe. Finally, FDA allowed for mail-order abortions, contrary to federal law and common sense, and an in-run around the promise of Dobbs that states may protect their legitimate interest in unborn life and women's health by regulating abortion. For at least 3 reasons, plaintiffs in this case have standing to challenge these actions. First, because of FDA's unlawful approval and deregulation of mifepristone, plaintiff doctors have been forced to participate in and complete elective abortions contrary to their consciences.
What's your best excerpt for that proposition?
Yes, Your Honor, I think we have several. If we look at the conscience harms at a high level, let's take Dr. Francis's declaration at page ROA 269. Dr. Francis says that plaintiff doctors with ethical, medical, and conscience objections to abortion will, quote, be forced to participate in completing unfinished elective chemical abortions.
There is any evidence that they've done that in the past?
So Dr. Francis herself talks about a specific example. That example is also at 269 and 270. Dr. Scott talks about completing 12 surgeries, as Your Honor noted, that required her to take embryos, fetuses, as well as pregnancy tissue from the mother's womb.
Erin Hawley, senior counsel with Alliance Defending Freedom, questioned by Judge Jennifer Walker Elrod. Today's Fifth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals oral argument in a case involving the FDA's approval over 20 years ago of an abortion pill. Zach Schonfeld, legal affairs reporter for The Hill, has been tracking this case, joining us now by phone. Thank you so much. You wrote before the oral argument that this was going to be before a panel of 3 judges with hostile views on abortion. Did any of that come out in the questions that you heard?
There did seem to be some of those inklings from those past rulings where we've seen this panel in the past give skepticism towards abortion measures. We saw some of those come out in today's oral argument. At times, the judges were asking about the procedure and specifically how mifepristone works, how doctors tend to go about these cases. So in some of those questions, we did see some of that skeptical language coming out. But in some respects, this is a very different case from abortion disputes that we've seen in the past. For many years, the question was, does the Constitution protect a right to abortion? Will Roe v. Wade continue to be the law of the land? After the Supreme Court last summer overturned the constitutional right to abortion, this case is now really one of the front lines on the legal side. But this is a case that at the end of the day boils down to administrative law. This case doesn't ask whether abortion should be protected. Rather, it asks whether the FDA, in approving mifepristone back in 2000, as well as a series of recent changes that they've made, whether those were lawfully made. So this is the questions about the agency's authority, the drug safety, rather than whether those constitutional arguments over whether abortion should be protected. So really the judges today confronting a very different issue than we've seen in the past with some of those abortion cases.
Were you able to sense which way they might rule on whether the FDA overstepped its bounds?
They did seem skeptical of the Biden administration's arguments to keep mifepristone available in its current form. It's not exactly clear quite how this ruling will come down. There are multiple parts to this. And there are also some procedural things that the judges have to decide before they even reach the merits. There are questions over whether the plaintiffs in this case have legal standing to actually bring this suit in the first place and challenge mifepristone's approval. The Biden administration also argues that some of their claims are time barred and they brought them too late. So there are some of those procedural questions that this case could eventually rest on. But if the court does reach the merits, we saw all 3 judges really questioning the pill's safety and in particular a number of these recent steps that the FDA took that made it more widely available. They took aim at how mifepristone can now be sent in the mail, at how it changed the pill. It can now be used up through the 10th week of pregnancy. It previously could only be used up through week 7. So some of those more recent changes seem more in jeopardy here following this oral argument. What seemed less clear is whether this court will go as far back to completely affirm the lower ruling from the judge in Texas, which not only struck down those recent changes, but it also suspended that FDA's original approval back in 2000. So still a number of ways this case could ultimately come down, but it does seem like it is very plausible here that this court in some fashion will restrict access to mifepristone.
Zach Schonfeld is legal affairs reporter for The Hill. No matter which way the appeals court rules, is it almost certain that the Supreme Court will be getting this case?
It is almost certain that the losing party here is going to appeal to the Supreme Court. Now, whether the Supreme Court decides to take the case is another question. As much as what their eventual ruling in the case would be, I think it's just as important that the Supreme Court, as opposed to the appeals court here, gets to control their own docket. So it is widely expected that whoever loses this part of the case is going to send it up to the Supreme Court, and then the ball will be in the Justices' Court. Will they take up this case? Depending on how this ruling comes down, they could take the issue of mifepristone's approval head on. They could also might just take it up on some of the procedural aspects I mentioned a moment ago, those questions about legal standing, whether this suit was brought too late. But in one way or another, this does seem destined that we're going to see some filings here land on the Supreme Court justices' desks. And also, I should note that any ruling that this appeals court panel does hand down will automatically be paused if the losing party does, in fact, appeal to the Supreme Court. Until this appeals process gets resolved, mifepristone access is preserved. The Supreme Court previously had stepped in to pause those as the appeal proceeds. So in terms of these restrictions here, what the Supreme Court could do and make the final say, that's probably still months down the road. But at some point here, it does seem that the Supreme Court is going to get this case again.
And a final question. When you were listening to the oral argument, was there any inclination that the political atmosphere surrounding the abortion issue and the striking down of Roe v. Wade at the Supreme Court level and then these other cases coming up got into the discussion, or was it a purely legal argument?
There was some of that political discussion. At one point, Judge Jennifer Elrod was talking about the implications that this decision, one way or the other, would have on women nationwide. Mifepristone is widely used. It's used in about half of all abortions now nationwide. So this ruling certainly will have significant impacts. The judges, irrespective of how they might rule, seem to both acknowledge that. And another moment during the oral argument that came up was when the Supreme Court previously, as I was mentioning, stepped in to issue that pause. Justice Samuel Alito, one of the court's conservatives, had dissented from that decision, and he wrote an accompanying statement that had questioned whether or not the Biden administration would have actually abided by an unfavorable ruling in this case. During today's oral arguments, that statement that Justice Alito made came up, and the Biden administration was asked point blank, will they abide by a ruling that would strike down mifepristone? The Biden administration Justice Department attorney said absolutely that they will abide by this. So certainly, I think it was lost on no one today that this is a high stakes case, and whether mifepristone is preserved or struck down altogether, that this is a case that is going to affect millions of women nationwide.
Zach Schonfeld, legal affairs reporter for The Hill. Find his stories at thehill.com. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
Washington Today continues in a moment.
Listening to programs on C-SPAN through C-SPAN Radio just got easier. Tell your smart speaker, play C-SPAN Radio, and listen to Washington Journal daily at 7 a.m. Eastern, important congressional hearings and other public affairs events throughout the day. And weekdays at 5 p.m. and 9 p.m. Eastern, catch Washington Today for a fast-paced report on the stories of the day. Listen to C-SPAN anytime. Just tell your smart speaker, play C-SPAN Radio. C-SPAN, powered by cable.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast wherever you get your podcasts and on the C-SPAN Now mobile app. A story from Politico. House Democrats wrangled internally on Wednesday over whether to try to stop Speaker Kevin McCarthy from punting on a bid to expel George Santos from Congress. The tension surfaced during a closed-door Democratic caucus meeting hours ahead of the expected vote on Congressman Robert Garcia's privilege resolution ejecting the indicted George Santos from his seat. Some Democrats argued in favor of blocking Speaker McCarthy's push to refer the Garcia plan to the House Ethics Committee, a party move that would instead force a full House vote on booting the scandal-plagued New York Republican, according to two people familiar with the situation. That from Politico. Congressman Garcia, in a news conference earlier in the day with other House Democrats, talked about why he wanted to expel Congressman Santos.
He's already admitted to lying and defrauding. He is an embarrassment to the House and to the country. People want better from us, and they want honest and ethical government. We know that in this House, we receive classified briefings, and George Santos should not have access to our country's most guarded secrets. Now, last week, the House voted on legislation regarding unemployment fraud, and he voted for it while standing accused of unemployment fraud. It's a time to restore this body to what it should be, a beacon of democracy, freedom, and truth. Remember, we all filed, this group, the resolution 3 months ago, even before this last group of charges. Now, with power comes great responsibility, and the representative from New York has clearly no interest in the public good. And we should not refer this matter to the Ethics Committee. This resolution is already there. Now, every Republican should stand up and join us to defend this body and expel George Santos.
Congressman Robert Garcia, Democrat from California, at a news conference. Later in the day, he did present his privilege resolution on the House floor to expel Republican Congressman George Santos of New York. But then Republican Congressman Anthony Esposito of New York moved to refer to the Ethics Committee. He explained that he would like to expel George Santos, but he doesn't think the votes were there.
I was one of the first members of this body to call on the subject of this resolution to resign, and I am personally in favor of this individual's expulsion from this House. Regrettably, however, I'm in the understanding that we currently do not have the 2/3 support from members of this House to expel that individual. I believe that this individual is a stain on this institution, a stain on the state of New York, a stain on Long Island, and a stain on the beloved Nassau County. With that said, we believe this resolution should be referred to the Committee on Ethics to ensure a thorough and expedient investigation into this matter. I firmly believe this is the quickest way ridding the House of Representatives of this scourge on government. I yield back the balance of my time and move the previous question.
Congressman Anthony Esposito, Republican from New York, today on the floor. And that vote to refer this resolution to the Ethics Committee passed by a vote of 221 to 204. It was Republicans voting yes and Democrats voting no. In addition, 7 Democrats voted present. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, Republican from California, was asked Tuesday night why he wanted to send this resolution on George Santos to the Ethics Committee.
The George Santos indictment is very serious. I also know in America you're innocent to proven guilty, but I don't want to sit around and wait. So what I would like to do is move this to ethics. I think I would like the House to take up this work and look at it, and if it rises to that occasion, then, because as we look to all these differences, I mean, we just had a report come out from Durham. What does that say about Adam Schiff? He lied to the American public. Should he be expelled from Congress as well, taking Congress and America down through the path that he did, lying to us? So I think these accusations are very serious. I have a very concern about George Santos. So what I do firmly believe is, just in the foundation of this country, you got to have a process. So I'm going to ask that the ethics look at this and don't do a short time basis. I mean, don't do a long time basis. I think we can look at this very quickly and come to a conclusion on what George Santos did and did not do through ethics, a safe bipartisan committee, equal number of Republicans and Democrats, and I think that's when you bring it back to Congress, and if it rises to the ability to.
House Speaker Kevin McCarthy at a news conference on Tuesday night. Again today, the House voted along party lines to send a resolution that would have expelled Congressman Santos, send that resolution to the Ethics Committee. Expelling a House member takes a 2/3 vote. Sending to the committee only takes a simple majority vote. And the House, in its history, has expelled members 4 times. The last time was in 2002, James Traficant, Democrat from Ohio. The House today passed a bill that would make assaulting a law enforcement officer a deportable offense for an immigrant to the United States. The bill is titled the Police Act. Police standing for Protect Our Law Enforcement with Immigration Control and Enforcement. Congressman Barry Moore, Republican from Alabama, spoke in favor.
The immigration statute does not explicitly make assaulting a law enforcement officer a deportable offense. H.R. 2494 changes that by creating grounds of removability specific to aliens who assault law enforcement officers. Although many such offenders can be removed based on other grounds, such as an aggravated assault, felony, or crime involving moral turpitude, H.R. 2494 ensures that criminal aliens cannot escape the immigration consequences of their actions through legal loopholes. Determining whether an alien is removable from the country is not as straightforward as it should be. In a case from last year, a federal judge observed that the process to determine whether an alien had been convicted of a crime that would make him removable presented a single legal question about a single conviction. Despite seemingly easy questions, the analysis spawned over 11 years, counting, 4 decisions to the Board of Immigration Appeals, 4 decisions by 3 different immigration judges, approximately 6 rounds of briefing, and a split opinion by a federal court. This bill would avoid those absurd results and approach to make crystal clear that an alien who assaults a law enforcement officer can be removed from the United States. Democrats have argued that this bill would encompass too much conduct due to state definitions of assault. That couldn't be further from the truth. Listen to what the bill requires. First, either an admission or a conviction of an assault or an offense. The assault must have been against a law enforcement officer, and that assault must have been while the law enforcement officer was performing his or her duties because of the performance of those duties or because of his or her status as a law enforcement officer.
Congressman Barry Moore, Republican from Alabama, on the House floor. Opposing this bill, Congressman Gerald Nadler, Democrat from New York, ranking member on the Judiciary Committee.
This is not about undocumented immigrants who are, of course, already removable. And this is not about people who are seeking to enter the United States. This is about people who have come here the so-called right way. We are talking about lawful permanent residents, people who have put down roots in our communities, many of whom have U.S. citizen spouses and children, and who have truly established themselves here in the United States. Many of these individuals are eligible to become U.S. citizens today. But this bill would make them deportable without even requiring that they be convicted of a crime. Simply that the assault or act constituting assault was committed, and that the individual admits to the commission of the act. That throws our whole notion of due process on its head. That's why it's absolutely critical that we adopt Mr. Correa's amendment to close this dangerous loophole. Even if we require a conviction, I am still concerned that the bill is so broad and over-inclusive that it could lead to truly absurd results and to the deportation of people who had no intention of ever harming a law enforcement officer. Let me give you 3 examples of what this bill would do as drafted. A person walks into a fire, sees a beam about to fall on a firefighter and pushes the firefighter out of the way. He has committed an act that is an assault on the firefighter who is a peace officer, and he is deportable. A person sees 2 men fighting on the street, and he breaks them up. He pushes them aside, not knowing that one of them is an undercover police officer. He has assaulted the police officer. A Jehovah's Witness is in an ambulance. The EMT reaches over to put a line in to give him a transfusion. The Jehovah's Witness pushes his hand away. He has committed assault on the EMT, who is a peace officer, and he is therefore deportable.
Congressman Gerald Nadler, Democrat from New York, today on the House floor. Another bill passed by the House today, also connected to Police Week, would allow federal law enforcement officers to purchase their retired service weapon. President Biden has issued statements on both of these bills raising concerns, but not specifically threatening to veto them. This from CBS News. President Biden on Wednesday honored 9 public safety officers with the Medal of Valor in recognition of extraordinary acts of heroism and bravery, including officers who died in the line of duty. Recipients of the award include 5 police officers, 1 sheriff's deputy, and 3 firefighters. Congress created the medal in 2001, intending the award to go to public safety officers who exhibit exceptional courage and swiftness of action and assume personal risk in an attempt to save or protect human life. The President held the ceremony at the White House.
There's no greater responsibility of government than to ensure the safety of the American people and those who serve and protect us all. We're incredibly proud of all of you, and I mean that. Incredibly proud of all of you. And we're going to have your back as long as we need to, as long as you're engaged. No, just the past 2 weeks, our nation has observed a National Fallen Firefighters Memorial Weekend, National Police Weekend, National Peace Memorial Officers Day. And I've also hosted this event several times as president and vice president and co-sponsored the bill that created the Medal of Freedom when I was a U.S. Senator, the Medal of Valor when I was a U.S. Senator. These are some of the most meaningful things that I do as president, because knowing you, meeting your families, looking into your eyes, seeing your courage gives me so much hope for the country. You represent, and this is not hyperbole, you represent the very best of us. You represent the best of who we are as Americans. And God bless you all. May God protect public safety officers and their families.
President Biden at the White House. 2 New York Police Department detectives who were awarded the Medal of Valor today posthumously died protecting a mother and son from an armed man in their home. A 3rd detective honored saved civilians during that incident and took down the gunman. Others receiving the medals were police officers from Littleton, Colorado, Claremont County, Ohio, and Houston, Texas, plus 3 firefighters from New York City. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan was asked today about a report from the Secret Service on Tuesday that an apparently intoxicated, unidentified intruder got by a security detail and entered Jake Sullivan's home in Washington at 3 a.m. on April 29th, was confronted by Jake Sullivan, who told him to leave, which he did, and that the Secret Service is doing a full review of what happened.
You had a break-in in your home recently. Can you tell us how you experienced that and to what extent your faith in the Secret Service has been challenged by this incident?
I don't have any comment on the incident, but I have total faith in the Secret Service, and they do a remarkable job every day as professionals protecting me.
The National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan traveling with the president and the White House press corps on Air Force One as they all went from Washington, D.C. to the G7 summit in Japan. Secret Service spokesperson Anthony Guglielmi with a statement, "Any deviation from our protective protocols is unacceptable, and if discovered, personnel will be held accountable. Modifications to the protective posture have also been made to ensure additional security layers are in place as we conduct this comprehensive review." On Capitol Hill, former Speaker of the House Paul Ryan, Republican from Wisconsin when he served, had his official portrait unveiled today in the Capitol, in the Speaker's lobby. He was a representative from 1999 through 2019, the 54th U.S. House Speaker from 2015 through 19, and he was also the 2012 Republican vice presidential nominee. He reflected on the issues that mattered to him when he was Speaker.
You know, people say Congress doesn't get much done, but I am proud of all that was accomplished between 2015 and 2019. I believe our record will stand the test of time. We passed over 1,200 bills in 2 years, and most of them were bipartisan. We fixed the VA. We dealt with opioid addiction. We funded cancer research. We rethought how to better fight the war on poverty. And we reformed our tax code for the first time in a generation. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act was an initiative that I had worked on for literally decades. Tax reform was my white whale because I believe in the principles of economic growth. I believe in opportunity and upward mobility. I believe that America can compete with anyone in the world if we give ourselves a fair chance. And that's what we did with tax reform. We created the conditions for another great American century. The other 2 white whales that got away were passing immigration reform and solving the upcoming debt crisis. If and when we fix that, and I do urge you to fix that, I'm confident that America will be assured of another great century. When you're the Speaker, all these policy wins really matter. But even for a policy wonk like me, I came to learn that they are not the most important part of the job description. When I took the job, I don't know if you remember this, the last words that John Boehner said to me were, "Your job, Ryan, is to protect this institution. Don't forget that." Those were words that I took to heart, and they guided me every single day since then.
Former Speaker of the House Paul Ryan on Capitol Hill today, his official Speaker portrait unveiling. In attendance, former Speaker John Boehner, Republican, former House Speaker Newt Gingrich, Republican, and former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, Democrat, And Paul Ryan was introduced by the current Speaker of the House, Republican Kevin McCarthy. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. Sign up for C-SPAN's evening newsletter word for word to get the stories Washington is talking about sent to your inbox every day. Subscribe at c-span.org/connect. Have a good night.